Okay, in this video, it's a lesson for the Koine project class. We're discussing dinosaurs, and it's captivated people all over the world. I love the topic, especially now that I have grandchildren, and my oldest is about to be 10 years old. So her interest and fascination with that subject, I can then guide her and attach that to the Bible, and then show her how and where even the fields of science that we know today, as I've taught you all in this class about physics, calculus, and chemistry, all being branches of theology from which pharmacology and technology extended and were the fruit of it, and that evolution is not even a field of science. It's not scientific, and science is theologic. So knowing that and reading, as any rational being could, the history of that which we know today, that calculus and was Leibniz and Newton, both theologians. All of our textbooks of the fields of science are produced by theologians. So talking about dinosaurs, it's really fascinating because for me, I try to eliminate and try to find out, as that really wouldn't be my interest, but since it's others, we use anything. So I'll come to be a, what they call themselves, paleontologist or something like that, to reach people. And if we have to begin our conversation with dinosaurs, great. So initiating student-teacher relationships. So those of you in here that have navigated the gauntlet of young versus old Earth, and you notice the people who were ill-disposed were also ill-equipped to have the conversation. But since this is a New Testament church, and those of you that meet here in this Koine project class here at Jacksonville, Arkansas, and know that our church here assembles fully, that is for the full purpose to provoke each other into love and unto good works, then you know that we have a freedom here granted us graciously, which calls upon us the great responsibility to nurture and foster, grow in grace and knowledge, learn. It's an educational environment. We're a fellowship of education. So we're free from the denominated, from the prescribed, out from outside. It's actually pre-talked, not prescripted. So it's pre-texted, not prescripted. So all that talk out there, but in the middle of all that chaos, we still have the harmonious arrangement that's unique in the Lord's New Testament church. So with that good reminder, if you still have people who are ill-disposed when you talk about the earth, you talk about the Bible doctrines, you talk about the beginnings, which is in the book of beginnings, Genesis, then just know they're not a studious person, and those who are averse to studious engagements really are not affording us the freedoms for which so many still die even today defending, and which were purchased by the blood of martyrs. So I'll enjoy talking about dinosaurs. I'll enjoy making observations, and my freedom will extend to others and has been extending to others. So I'll continue to enjoy that freedom, as I was taught and trained when I was in seminary by people who knew that we had freedom first to then actively engage and faithfully engage. So when we talk about the dinosaurs, and we'll get there in just a moment, but before anything, we always have God eternal, and he was here before Genesis 1:1. Of course, he exists outside of time. Of course, as omnidimensional, he enters and exits time and space as he wills. He created it, and well, that's not even a discussion. So we talk about theologos, theologic life there. When Genesis 1:1 occurred, there's questions. People want to know, well, what is all this about? Well, angelic life. Now, I don't know what angels are made of. I know in the Bible, you can look this up, ministering spirits, sometimes descriptive language, fire, things like that. So when we do our study, and those of you in this class, you can do your homework so that when we do meet again beginning this approaching Lord's Day, those of you that might want to ask this coming Sunday, the 14th, that's great. Bring your homework, do your own research, and then we can have an actual conversation. And first of all, I'd like to just say thank you to those of you in the Koine Project class for having an actual interest in studying the Bible so that we can actually have a Bible dialogue. We've seen what happens when they called themselves fundamentalists, and we've learned now they were neither fun nor mental. Seems to be a good word. They self-proclaim themselves, and we all have learned the hard way that it's always our expense, and the Bible tells us to be patient with people who contradict between their own ears. They oppose themselves. So when we look at angelic life being created in beginning, heaven and earth, and now we have what we call that, we know there's war in heaven. We know that the entire universe, tons of cosmic debris fall through our atmosphere every day. Observations in space have observed and noticed 2/3 of matter is dark matter, dark energy, colliding galaxies, all types of horrific things taking place out there. We are the unique life base, if you will, source center of life here on this planet as we know it. Now that didn't come to exist, life as we know it. You have the idea of the birth of earth in verse 2 there, ruach, spirit, that's feminine, and then brooding, PL stem, intensely brooding, and all that's describing preparations for birth. That would be of earth as we know it. So before I move on, just like to talk about Bullinger's Blunder. Matter of fact, I misspelled the poor man's name. E.W. Bullinger, the great lexicographer as he's known, the Companion Study Bible, Bullinger and all that. So I left the G out of his name, but that'll be good enough. But you know, it's just a mistake, and if he were still here today, he would forgive us. So his mistake, or blunder, I just said that because it alliterates, but he talked as though somehow when geology, those who endeavor in the field of geo, that's the earth, studying the earth, finally settle on a time or an amount of age that he said there's ample room between 1:1 and 1:2 of Genesis. That's the interval here about which so many banter, but I don't know what the ill disposition's about. But anyway, they don't seem to really want to gain understanding. They just want to push a pushpin onto a chart and then move on. Well, that's somewhat what Bullinger did. He just said they'll be able to put that time there. It's just when you look at Genesis 1:14, and I'll make sure and confirm that, but in Genesis 1:14, he was, that's referential time, and that time did not exist in any way, anywhere close. And trying to take a unit of measure, for example, let me confirm that. Yeah, let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And that word for day is yom. Time and the word day are the same term. So referential time, Genesis 1:14 can't go here because there's no such thing here. There is no referential time. I'll draw a circle. There is no referential time. That only existed, that time went with this cosmos, ton cosmon, Romans, or ton cosmon for those who often correct me in my pronunciation, which is great. I do like that because when people are that specific, I then enjoy expecting some more specificity. So in this cosmos here, Romans 5:12, into which it says the Adam, when he sinned, through him sin entered, and then death entered, and upon the death all sin. Well, that cosmos there is the anthropo-bio-zoological life. That didn't exist here. We don't have anything about that. So you hear a terrible argument about death before sin, but I don't know how you kill an angel. I don't know how to do that. So I don't know how that became a very big argument for people, but there is no Genesis 1:14, no referential time here. That doesn't occur till, well, we just confirmed Genesis 1:14. Referential time is what we know, the galaxy. You can go to the University of Texas website, their planetarium astronomy, and they have this amazing, literally, software, and I'm sure it's elsewhere out there, but you can actually move the different planets in the galaxy, but everything, it shows its relationship and how it all moves simultaneously, and it'll show the date, the time, the month, the hour, whatever. So that type of time goes here with us. We know about the word biology, zoology, anthropology. All that is here in this earth that we know was birthed according to the description in verse 2 of Genesis. So there is really no place for a conflict, and to have a rationale for a war in heaven and all the calamitous events that we know out there in space, and then to have the earth as we know it today, which is really fascinating when you use the word cosmos, and notice that's the word Paul's using. This harmonious arrangement was designed to accommodate this life, this kind of life. So when Adam did what he did, he brought sin into this cosmology and this cosmology, this cosmos, and death followed. And now all of this is what we know. I mean, there's no gospel for angels. There's no plan of redemption for angelic. There's no concept of time here. You remember we talked before about ratio and how that would have happened if time were here and we were to take that. Well, for example, to show you how units of time are so difficult, let's notice here there's a unit of time, Ly, and that equals a light year. Because in astronomy, dealing with numbers that large, they literally invented a unit of measure that would allow them to do their calculations without constantly, that's where we have exponents, for example. We write something to the 10 to the third, and that makes it easier to write. But now we talk about something being so many light years, so we might put 20 Ly, 20 light years. So we have a unit of measure. Now, what is the unit of measure in the interval of 1 and 2, which we have H1961? That's that word that really, I'm not sure why people don't enjoy studying that. But again, this is what I'm speaking from as a pastor of a New Testament church where we are free to learn and perpetually grow in grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior. And we also, I really don't know what that spirit is that would come into a harmonious arrangement, unprecedented in this world and even universe, the Lord's New Testament assembly, congregation, New Covenant body, and then introduce such an ill disposition toward those who are obviously, it was presumed that the freedom to collaboratively reason and collectively learn was being prohibited, but that didn't last long. The inalienable right to peaceably assemble prevailed, and of course Christ said just focus on his kingdom and the state of justice within it, and he'll take care of everything else. So we've never had to provide for ourselves while we pursue the interest of the king of this church who reigns over us. So I hate to bring that up all the time. It's just so nasty of people. I'm not sure. I guess they just hear things and take the bits and pieces so they can be primed and charged, and then they are catalyzed, I suppose. Whatever that is, I don't know what that means to be radicalized by study. Apparently it's not study. If you study and become radicalized, then you weren't studying. You were just looking for something to toss at someone else. So that's really silly, but that's okay. We have Bullinger's Blunder, so that you can't put referential. There's no such thing there. So it wouldn't matter what geologists were to say to place a unit of measure within a realm. This interval isn't possible anyway. There are those who say the interval doesn't exist, but even if we proved it existed, that something actually happened here, as Ha-Yah says, which corresponds to Genomai in our Koine Greek text. But if what happened didn't even call for an interval, or if we could prove an interval, it still wouldn't allow for what Blunder was saying, just place it in there. Well, he didn't really take a lot of interest in it, apparently. And then when you look at his book on number in Scripture, he never even noticed the relationship of numbers. In the sense of, he didn't notice the inverse relationship between the ratio of 1 day to 1,000 years, inverse relationship being multiplication. He didn't notice the 1,000 years to a day. He didn't notice the decay rate. That was in Genetic Entropy by John Sanford of Cornell University, a genius, and he noticed it and wrote a great and wonderful book about it. Now, let's move on. So we have an interval, but no G114. We have death, sin and death entering, but that's in a cosmos that includes only anthropo, bio, and zoological life. So really, I don't know yet where the problem is. And before we move on, though, we're really asking about the dinosaurs. And that was the point. So now that we're after the flood, we're making notes. We've done well about unit of measure. We've covered Bullinger's blunder there. It's really, there's no such thing as a unit of measure for an interval. There's no such thing. So that's just about, oh yeah, here we go. We'll just write no G114 between 1, 1 and 1, 2. There we go. Now that's just something we can know. And as I've taught you all in this class, let's get what we can know, similar to mathematics and arithmetic. Get your constants first before we toss out more and more variables. So that's exactly what we do. So number 2, we have the constant reality that the cosmos of Romans 5:12 was that of the anthro, biological, and zoological. So the A through Z cosmos, which that worked out really well. Anthropos, zoology, you know, the word zoo, and you know, like even microbiology, which requires microscope to see. So anthropos through zoe. So that's what, those are the contents of that category, of that cosmos, and the context, as you'll learn in hermeneutics, context, and then where you're not sure, context. So that takes care of that. And then number 3, we have, we've answered H 1961 quite well. It means something. It's there, and Ha-Yah does hold an implication, or it would not be there, because we know in the same verse, in verse 2, we have was in italics and was in standard print, so the standard font. So the keys now we have are back to our dinosaurs. So our dinosaurs would be, let's say, zoo animals, okay? Whatever that means. So now we look at Genesis 8:17. Now we're at Noah, and Genesis 9:11 and 12. And I'll quote from, as I try to tell you that your references that you bring to class, always have those noted so we can have a smoother introduction and entrance into the conversation. I like to embark the conversation as quickly as possible without then someone somewhere. But we do know that Paul himself would quote like that, saying a certain someone somewhere said. Well, you're not Paul, and I don't have the time to indulge in. So bring your references to class. And here's one. McGregor, 2017, observed that the biblical account does not allow for the death of an entire species after the flood. So we're here making post-flood notes. We're looking back. We're not the antediluvian population. We're the post-diluvian. And I would have written that, but I didn't have room. So In Genesis 8:17, God commanded Noah to bring forth with him all animals so they might breed abundantly on the earth and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. It was clearly God's intention that all creatures that boarded the ark be preserved to replenish the earth after the flood. And Genesis 9:11 through 12, here we are now. So we're moving from this, we're going here. It says that the covenant not to destroy the living creation with another flood was with Noah and every living creature that is with you for all successive generations. It's actually in the King James text. Let me make sure, because I don't think that's King James. Let me check here real quick. Yeah, here we go. So let's go to this Genesis 9 and let's see what we got here. A perpetual, yeah, I wrote that here. I already had that. Perpetual olam. Now this is nice if those of you that bother to learn the Hebrew alphabet, because we'll look at the number value of this, we'll look at the picture, and now of course the phonetic. So we have the phonetic, which is the word we're pronouncing. We have the numeric, which is the value that we can even total, and then we can look at each one. Then we have the pictograph. So there's a lot there we can study, and will study if as I say, the Lord wills, and we have the time. So this perpetual, so the best I can say, where's my dinosaurs? They fell in here in the zoo, we'll just say that. So from the zoo, let me see, the Genesis, well, what came out of the Genesis 1-2, oh, that even rhymes. So the 1-2 zoo and the flood, and then there's, so no dinosaurs embark the ark. Now that's not a point of controversy nor contention for me. I'm just working on the dinosaurs. So because this word is perpetual without end, the covenant included. So from the zoological population, Noah brought in animals that God had a perpetual covenant with which God had a perpetual covenant, Noah, his family, and those particular animals. So it's the best I can do so far. If you can help me find the dinosaurs, great. If you can help as understanding here that when the cast down of the devil and the war in heaven and all that took place, that at this time it appears that the catapult that we've seen in very ancient documents and references made, which I'll bring those as well, but it appears that if that original matter of which all that's in the universe had once been collected together, that would have been at a rate of speed 36 times the speed of light, which is fascinating if you want to talk about how destructive that was. And if you say, well, what was the big deal about Satan's rebellion in heaven? Well, the big deal was that God's reaction set in motion a rate, an acceleration of 36 times the speed of light. So that's interesting. That is in the evaluation of the numbers we have and in our freedom to evaluate and study. So enjoy that, but best I can do is from the zoological life, animals were selected, they embarked the boat, and no species that embarked the boat went out of existence. So whatever we have here today is somehow tied back to what went on to the boat, as similar as we say all life went back to Adam. We now have the animals here went back to that ark that's literally was the gathering of these particular species. So at this moment it looks like the dinosaurs were Baptist. That is, they were totally immersed. So you have a blessed day.